hundreds of thousands of veterans rights stripped from them Thursday. If they think they can get away with that, there is nothing stopping them from doing that to any of you out there listening to this.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We have now on the line Paul Osadobe. He is a steward with the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 476 at Housing and Urban Development. He is also a member of the steering committee of the Federal Unionists Network. Paul, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. So we wanted to reach out to y'all to have somebody on to break down in more detail a little bit about the executive order and how federal unionists are responding or thinking about how to respond. Obviously, we're still very much in the early hours of this, having been executed. It was late Thursday night when it happened. So barely even one business day has passed since the order was signed. But I guess just to start off with, what does the executive order purport to do?
Basically, it says in the name of national security that they are union busting across most of the agencies of the federal government that have collective bargaining. So they're saying that they passed an executive order and a memo that is reducing or eliminating the ability of workers to collectively bargain and to have power in the workplace through negotiating contracts. But it's actually not just that. It's an even wider attack than that. That's already bad enough. That's already a huge historic attack on labor, but it goes beyond that. It says no more official time in the workplace. So we can't have stewards like me use official time to represent people when the agency violates their rights. It says that the unions have to be kicked out of the building because many unions have office space within the federal buildings that they work in so that people can come to their offices directly and ask for help. They're kicking the unions out of those spaces. They're getting rid of dues deductions. So they're trying to financially attack the unions by cutting off their source of income that they use to file the lawsuits and represent people. And it's just so many different forms of attack. And the most important thing to understand is that this has nothing to do with national security. This is about attacking workplace power. It's about attacking the ability of any group of workers or any institution to hold this administration accountable for anything that they do. And it's about retaliation for the fact that, yes, it has been workers and worker organizations who have been the most effective in slowing down, blocking, reversing many of the illegal actions that have happened over the last month or two. This is because we are the most effective. That's why the attack has gone nuclear right now.
Right. And so I want to get more into in my next question, I want to talk about how they really kind of give away the game as to what is the actual reason for this. But I want to spend a little bit of time on why is the national security argument wrong? Like, just on its face, like let's say that we're talking to somebody and they're a dear confused brother, right? Working in the private sector, and they see Department of Defense. Well, why? And they just, they're operating in good faith. Obviously, we know Donald Trump, his administration is not. But this dear brother, dear sister in the private sector, they're like, well, why isn't the Department of Defense? I heard Department of Defense and I heard national security. So, I don't know. The Department of Defense does national security. So if the law says that, he can take away collective bargaining because of national security, like facially, why is that wrong?
Sure. I think it's illustrative to just look at history, and it's not even history from a long time ago. It's from the first Trump administration. He attempted to do something similar with the Department of Defense, but instead of doing what he did now, which is just a blanket attack and retaliation, he said, hey, I'm going to ask the secretary to assess whether it's possible to have unions and collective bargaining in accordance with national security. And even under the first administration, they did not end up doing it because they knew that there is no conflict between worker power and national security. The more impact and input that workers have in the workplace, the more effective the workplace is, regardless of what the mission is. And that's also pretty clear to see because, I mean, even in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 under the Bush administration, they did not get rid of unions and collective bargaining for national security. They didn't do it under Reagan, not under Nixon. Well, that was a while back, but there's been so many national security challenges over the decades, and there's never been any conflict before. And now, when it's supposed to be Donald the Dove, we're not supposed to be at war all over the world. We're supposed to be turning inward. Now he's saying that national security conflicts to such a huge extent that you can't have unions at the EPA. You can't have unions at Health and Human Services. That doesn't hold up to any scrutiny at all. It's not about that. And like you said, they gave away the game. They explicitly said in the memo that this is about the fact that unions are stopping me from doing what I want to do. It's the fact that we are the ones holding him accountable by collective power and pooling our resources, by being the ones speaking out and letting people know the services that are being destroyed and how communities are being harmed. That's exactly what he wants to stop. He wants to stop any potential organized response to the destruction of the government. That's what's at stake here.
Yeah, I mean, just some more of the even more kind of on its face absurd departments. The Department of the Treasury, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, Office of Refugee Resettlement, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the Science and Technology Directorate of the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, the Bureau of Land Management, the Department of the Interior. You know, it's just so, most of these are just facially absurd. And then I really liked how you pointed back to history, and I want to dwell on that a little bit and just foot stomp on the fact that no other president, including Trump in his first term, thought that he had the authority to unilaterally revoke collective bargaining rights on national security grounds because the grounds are so flimsy. It is so facially absurd because in the law, and I went and read like a lot of the Civil Service Reform Act, like just the text of the law, just to try to help me understand this. And you know, it's shocking today as unions are on one hand very, very popular, but politically, when you talk about politicians, they're a very partisan issue. Republicans universally almost oppose unions in all their forms, and Democrats don't hate us most of the time. And so it's a very partisan kind of thing. And yet, when you go and look at like the National Labor Relations Act and the 1978 Civil Service Reform Act, the government is not neutral about the prospect of collective bargaining. The government, and it is still the law, the government says in the Civil Service Reform Act that collective bargaining is, like you said, a positive. It benefits the taxpayer. It benefits
it's in
the
public interest. It says that in the law.
Exactly. And so the people who wrote the law and every president since 1978 have all agreed that national security, and which is, we're not disputing that some DOD workers, Department of Defense workers, do national security stuff, but the Civil Service Reform Act only allows for revocation of collective bargaining right when collective bargaining conflicts with national security interests. It doesn't say, oh, there are national security interests, so you can remove collective bargaining. It says collective bargaining has to conflict with it. And the Congress did not believe that it conflicts with it, and every president since has not believed that in these agencies, in the vast majority of the federal government, that collective bargaining conflicts with national security. And so let's move to, like, what is the actual argument. And like we've said, he makes it very clear in his little fact sheet about this, where he says, well, and he actually attacks the Civil Service Reform Act because he says, quote, it enables hostile federal unions to obstruct agency management, and then they say the largest federal union describes itself as, quote, fighting back against Trump. That's why they're doing this, right? And so I don't know if you have like much else to say about it, but they just give away the game. It's not actually that they think there's national security things that are conflicting with us being able to bargain collectively. It's that they don't like little people like the listener, like you in the audience that's listening, like me or like Paul or like anybody else, having any sort of say over what happens except for the oligarchs like Trump and Musk.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is about. There's been no change in national security. There's been no change in what unions do. What's changed is that the president has decided to equate national security and the interests of the country with whatever he wants to do at any given moment. And if those two things don't align, or if people want to do something different from that, he considers that a personal insult that he responds to with attacks, legal challenges, threats, and up to violence at this point. So that's what this is about. And he's attempting to use that same playbook on the most organized group of regular people that exists in society, which is organized labor. And this attack is not going to stop here, because these fake national security justifications, those are not limited to the federal sector. You can use that for almost anything. You can decide that food production is essential to American national security, so no unions in the private sector food industry. You can decide that the service industry is the biggest employer of people in this country, so no unions there. The logic here, if you want to call it logic, has no limit. All it is about is centralizing power into the hands of Donald Trump, oligarchs, billionaires, and the most already unaccountable people in our society. And collective bargaining, what they really hate about it is that it gives the representatives of ordinary working people equal power to management. When we come to the negotiating table, we are supposed to be equal, labor and management. They hate that concept. They wish it was never established and they want it gone. But this is the time to defend it, because if they're able to take that from hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people all at once without a fight back, then that is immediately coming to the private sector and the rest of the labor movement. If they think they can do that to veterans, hundreds of thousands of veterans had their rights stripped from them yesterday or Thursday. If they think they can get away with that, there is nothing stopping them from doing that to any of you out there listening to this. So
exactly.
This is the time to respond accordingly.
Right.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Yes, it's very important that folks respond accordingly. And folks may think that Paul is being, hyperbolic or whatever, because like, oh, well, the National Labor Relations Act protects the right of private sector workers to unionize. It would be illegal for Trump to do away with our collective bargaining rights. And well, the federal unions argue that this is illegal, and Trump has already violated the National Labor Relations Act when he fired Gwen Wilcox. And so he has no problem with violating the National Labor Relations Act. He's already said and done that exactly. And so, the idea that he won't just declare with an executive order that private sector workers can't unionize anymore is, at this point, we're kind of past that. And so I want to talk about what the appropriate response is and how the Federal Unionists Network is responding. But I have one more question while we're dwelling on these arguments and we're trying to engage, with our dear sisters and brothers who may be confused. And so what is, if I go and I talk to somebody, what is the positive case for collective bargaining in these agencies? We've talked about it and we've said it, and we've talked about how the law says that. That's what actually the policy in law of the United States is that collective bargaining is positive. But what is the kind of practical and material positive case for collective bargaining in these agencies? Because, I talk to people in the private sector and they're like, well, isn't it when you're bargaining as a federal employee or as a public sector employee, you're bargaining against me as the taxpayer? And FDR didn't want public sector unions either. And so therefore, they shouldn't exist and they're bad because they're bargaining against me. And so what is the rebuttal to that? What is the positive case for collective bargaining for federal workers?
Sure. So it's really important to understand the history here, because there was a history where federal workers and public sector union members in general didn't have the right to collective bargain. And before then, what happened was, just mass disruptions of services. There was a lot of conflict between labor and management that was really inefficient and that actually made services worse. And that's why there were massive majorities in Congress in the 70s. And during a conservative era, we're talking huge majorities in both houses of Congress and signed into law and maintained from then until this last Thursday, the principle that you want ordinary working people in the room, the people who most know how the services operate and the best way to make those services work for the American people. You want them at the bargaining table saying that, hey, we need protections for whistleblowing so that someone who's defrauding people or abusing people is held accountable. We need the ability to have scientific integrity in our contract so that we aren't pressured to say things that are false in order to please a boss somewhere. These are the things that the American people want. Accurate information, well-trained and well-paid staff so that people are able to do the best job for the people that they serve. That's what collective bargaining brings, because otherwise you have people who are very far away from the experience of the average American making all the rules in the workplace that affects the services that come down to people. Because it's very important to remember, federal workers are just people in your community. They are just your neighbors, your friends, your aunts, your uncles, your kids. We are ordinary working class people, and you want us in the room and you want us equal to management, because without that, you are getting everything decided by the Elon Musks of the world. And we've already seen that that is not good for anyone.
Right. And, another one of the problems that existed before the federal service was professionalized was what Trump is trying to pull us back into, where we had this spoils system where we, just because somebody is politically loyal to the president, they got these rank and file jobs, and they had like zero expertise in, being a cost engineer at the Corps of Engineers. Somebody was able to be an equivalent position because they were friends with the president or something. And we saw, as a society, the inefficiencies that came along with that, with having people that are not qualified doing the job. We saw the corruption that came along with that. And we said, we don't like that. We want a professional civil service that advances people based on merit. We have a whole merit systems protection board. That's a big thing in the government.
Which is also being broken, just like
Exactly.
any other system that benefits and protects working people. Just want to say that.
Yes, it's very, yes. And so, they're trying to destroy this whole and bring us back to a genuinely less efficient, less professional sort of federal government that only benefits his benefactors and the people that donated to his campaign. And so there we go. There's the positive. And now nobody in good faith is going to be able to say that unions don't belong in the public sector, because we've dealt with the argument. So with that out of the way, how are unions responding to this attack on our rights to unionization?
We are seeing a never before seen coalition form right now, because all the major federal unions and even the largely private sector ones understand that this is an existential moment, that this is an attack on the concept of working people having any power over what happens in the workplace and in society. And so we are seeing a coalition form to develop the response that needs to happen, because business as usual clearly is not working. And so we're all figuring out ways of organizing, of making everyone understand that this is the time. If you don't see yourself as a union activist, this is the time to become one, because the only way out of this is to build collective power as quickly and as durably as possible. And so we're seeing far more resources develop towards organizing training and discussions of how to get people mobilized out in the streets, how to get people to really pressure their congresspeople in a targeted way, not just a haphazard, call your legislator when you feel like it, when you have time, but no, really target the people who can exercise congressional oversight to stop this, because they can. This is absolutely not something where the president can just do all of this on his own with no input from anyone else. Other people in Congress have to allow this to happen. And you out there do not have to allow them to allow this. You can tell them to do their job and basically let them know that they're not going to have any peace until they do that. So that's what we're seeing. And the Federal Unionist Network is really central within the federal space to driving that renewed orientation towards organizing, because organizing is the path out of this. You're not going to get enough pressure on congresspeople or the administration or the media or anyone who we need to pressure until you build up the capacity for mass mobilization, and you do that through organizing. So I'm sure you're going to ask, but tomorrow the Federal Unionist Network is going to be having a call at 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be about the historic nature of the moment that we face right now, the need to respond in kind, because the attacks from the administration have been escalating and escalating and escalating, and it's time for us to understand the situation we're in and escalate back. That time is right now. There's no tomorrow unless we do that. So that's what this call tomorrow is going to be about. How exactly do you start having one-on-one conversations with your coworkers and tell them whatever peace and safety you thought you were going to have by keeping your head down and not getting involved in that, that is not going to work for you. Look at what is happening, really take it in, and understand that you got to get yourself involved, everyone around you involved, your community involved, your family, your friends, to stand up right now and start fighting back. Because if you don't do that, you're going to find yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in.
Right.
We're already there, and it's only going down from here, but we do have the power to stop this. That comes through organizing.
Absolutely. And we're going to be wrapping up here in a few more minutes with Paul. So if other federal workers would like to call in and talk to us about your immediate reactions to this executive order and how your local unions are reacting, we would love to hear from you. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can leave a voicemail if you're catching this when we are not live. You talked about, Paul, a mass call that you are that the Federal Unionist Network is doing tomorrow. Tell us what time that is, where to sign up, and what are you going to be discussing on the call specifically. And then if somebody catches this after the call is over, how can they get plugged in and try to catch up?
Sure. So the call is going to be 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. It's going to be a virtual call, and you can go to our social media pages at Fed Workers United on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and that will have the flyer with the link. What we're going to be talking about is the historic nature of the moment, the level of attacks that we're actually facing, and how those attacks demand a response that's at that same level of the way that we are being attacked. So we're going to talk about how to build a movement starting in your workplace, how to do organizing conversations, how to flyer your federal building so you can get your coworkers to understand that the only thing that's going to save them right now is themselves, and organizing together to put pressure on the administration and create a crisis that they cannot handle. Because I think if all 700,000 to 1 million federal workers that were just attacked this Thursday actually responded, this is not sustainable for them. So we have to get from here to there, and that starts tomorrow. And in addition to that, on April 5th, there's going to be nationwide events. So if you're not able to be on the call tomorrow, you can still get out in the streets and get yourself, your coworkers, and your community out in the streets on April 5th. You can go to, again, on our social media pages and find out where a local event is for you. You can get out there with all the various community groups that are fighting against what's happening right now, and you can tell this administration and oligarchs that you are organizing to stop them. And that's what we all have to do right now.
5 to 6 p.m. tomorrow, Sunday, March the 30th, Eastern Time. You can find the sign-up information on the Federal Unionist Network's social media pages at Fed Workers United. You can also go to savepublicservices.com and sign up for the sign up to get alerts and stuff from the Federal Unionist Network. So really excited to see that. I'm going to try to hop on, and I encourage other folks to, for sure. Is there anything else, Paul, that you wanted to make sure that we got to before we let you go?
If you are a federal worker and you are interested in organizing a new federal union and strengthening your existing union, join the Federal Unionist Network. You can Google our website, federalunionist.net, and go to the Join Us page, and we'll get you plugged in. And right now, I just want everyone to stop and think about the moment that you're in, and what are you going to do so that in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you can look back and say, hey, that was a moment of extreme danger. They were coming after the entire working class, and I did something to stop it, and we stopped it together. Think about what it would take to do that, and start doing that tonight. That's what I have to say.
Paul Osadobe, AFGE Local 476, Union Steward at Housing and Urban Development, Steering Committee member of the Federal Unionists Network. Really appreciate your time. Oh, one more question. Is the call tomorrow endorsed by the federal employee unions, or is this just a fun thing?
It's endorsed by several of them, and we're getting more by the second. I believe we have NEFI, IFPTE, and the American Federation of Teachers on so far, and we're getting more and more.
Great. Well, Paul, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fg.